Let me start by saying that I genuinely believed I was being the mature, understanding husband when my wife Natalie suggested we take a week apart to reflect on our marriage. Looking back now, I can't believe how naive I was, but at the time it felt like we were handling our problems like adults, instead of screaming at each other or immediately jumping to divorce like so many couples I know. I'm Marcus, 35, and I work as a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm in Denver. Natalie is 32 and works in marketing management for a tech startup that's been growing rapidly over the past year. We've been married for 8 years, and honestly, most of those years were pretty solid. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we always managed to talk things through. Or so I thought. The trouble started about 6 months ago when Natalie got promoted to senior marketing manager. The new position came with longer hours, more responsibility, and apparently a lot more stress than either of us anticipated. She started coming home later, seemed constantly on edge, and our conversations became increasingly strained. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give me one-word answers. When I suggested we plan a weekend getaway, she'd say she was too busy. When I brought up the idea of finally starting a family, something we'd been discussing for years, she'd changed the subject entirely. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago during what started as a normal dinner conversation. I had made her favorite pasta dish, opened a bottle of wine, and was telling her about a funny incident at work when she suddenly put down her fork and said, "Marcus, I feel suffocated." The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Suffocated? By our marriage, by me. She went on to explain that she felt like she was losing herself, that she couldn't breathe in our relationship, that she needed space to rediscover who she was outside of being a wife. She used all the therapy speak you hear on podcasts and self-help books, talking about individual growth, personal boundaries, and processing emotions independently. What really got to me was how calm and rational she sounded. This wasn't an emotional outburst or a fight. She had clearly thought this through, maybe even rehearsed it. She explained that she wasn't talking about separation or divorce, just a brief period where we could both step back and evaluate what we really wanted from our marriage. Think of it as preventive maintenance, she said, actually using those words. Like when you service a car before it breaks down completely. The analogy stung, but her logic seemed sound. Maybe we did need some space to appreciate what we had. Maybe I had been too clingy, too comfortable in our routine. Maybe this was exactly the kind of mature problem-solving that would make our marriage stronger in the long run. She had it all planned out. We would take exactly 1 week, Monday through Sunday, to live separately and reflect on our relationship. I would stay at my brother Owen's apartment across town. She would stay with her best friend Brielle, who had a spare room and had been through her own divorce last year. No contact during the week except for emergencies. At the end of the 7 days, we'd meet and talk about what we'd learned about ourselves and our marriage. "I think this could really help us, Marcus," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I love you, but I need to make sure I'm choosing to be here, not just staying out of habit or comfort." How do you argue with that? How do you tell your wife that wanting to be sure about your marriage is wrong? I felt like if I protested too much, I'd just be proving her point about feeling suffocated. So I agreed. We spent that weekend making practical arrangements. Owen was happy to let me crash on his couch. He'd been going through his own relationship troubles and said the company would be good for both of us. Natalie confirmed that Brielle was fine with her staying over. We decided I'd pack a bag and leave Monday morning, and she'd go to Brielle's that evening after work. Sunday night, as I was packing my clothes, Natalie gave me a long hug and said, "Thank you for understanding. This is going to be good for us. I can feel it." Monday morning came and I kissed her goodbye like it was any normal workday, except it wasn't. I was leaving my own home for a week because my wife needed space to figure out if she wanted to stay married to me. As I drove to Owen's place with my duffel bag in the back seat, I actually felt a strange sense of optimism. Maybe this week would give me clarity too. Maybe I'd realize things about our relationship that I'd been too close to see. Maybe we'd both come back with a renewed appreciation for what we had built together. God, I was such a fool. The first few days at Owen's weren't as bad as I expected. My brother had always been the bachelor type. His place was basically a man cave with a decent couch, a huge TV, and a fridge full of beer. He worked as a freelance graphic designer, so he was around most of the time, which meant I had company when I wasn't at work. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in a strange kind of limbo. I found myself thinking about Natalie constantly, wondering what she was doing, how she was feeling, whether she was missing me at all. Owen kept telling me to use the time to live a little, go out to bars, meet people, remember what it was like to be single. But that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to figure out how to be a better husband. I even started planning a surprise for when she came back. There was this little jewelry store downtown where I'd bought her engagement ring, and I'd been eyeing a delicate silver bracelet with her birthstone that I thought she'd love. I was going to buy it, along with those expensive white roses she always admired at the farmer's market, and have them waiting for her when we reunited on Sunday. By Wednesday afternoon, I was actually feeling pretty good about our week apart. I'd been doing some serious self-reflection, and I was ready to admit that maybe I had been taking our relationship for granted. Maybe I had gotten too comfortable, too routine. This separation was going to make me a better partner. That's when I realized I'd forgotten to pack enough work shirts. I had brought enough casual clothes for the week, but I'd only grabbed 3 dress shirts, and I had client meetings Thursday and Friday that required me to look professional. Owen was shorter and stockier than me, so borrowing from him wasn't an option. The logical solution was simple: go home, grab a couple more shirts from my closet, and leave. I remember feeling slightly guilty about it, like I was somehow breaking the rules of our separation, but it was just practical necessity, right? I'd be in and out in 5 minutes. Natalie was at work and wouldn't even know I'd been there. I pulled into our driveway around 2 p.m. on Wednesday. The house looked exactly the same blue shutters, same potted plants on the porch that Natalie was always fussing over. I used my key to unlock the front door and stepped into the familiar smell of our home. There was something different about the air, though, a lingering scent I couldn't quite place. I headed straight upstairs to our bedroom to grab the shirts from my closet. That's when I saw it. Our bed was unmade. Now that might not sound like much, but you have to understand, Natalie was obsessive about making the bed every morning. She said it was the foundation of starting the day right. In 8 years of marriage, I could count on one hand the number of times she'd left the bed unmade, and those were only when she was sick or we were rushing to catch a flight. But it wasn't just unmade. It was unmade in a way that looked different. The sheets were twisted and pulled in directions that didn't match how either of us slept. The pillows were scattered wrong. My side of the bed looked like it hadn't been touched, but her side and the middle looked like a tornado had hit it. My heart started pounding as I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe she'd had trouble sleeping. Maybe she'd been tossing and turning, worried about our separation. Maybe she'd been sick and had taken a day off work. Then I noticed the wine glasses. 2 wine glasses on her nightstand, not 1, 2. We owned those glasses. They were part of a set we'd received as a wedding gift. But there were 2 of them, and they both had lipstick marks, the same shade of red that Natalie always wore. My hands were shaking as I moved closer. Next to the wine glasses was an empty bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, the expensive kind that we usually only opened for special occasions. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe Brielle had come over to help her pack. Maybe they'd had a girls' night to talk about the separation. But even as I thought it, I knew it didn't make sense. The bed, the way the sheets were twisted, the intimate way the glasses were positioned. I stumbled toward our bathroom, and that's when I saw the final piece of evidence that shattered my world completely. Men's underwear, boxer briefs to be specific. Black, medium-sized, definitely not mine. They were sitting on the bathroom counter, like someone had just taken them off. I picked them up with trembling hands, and they were still damp. The room started spinning. I had to grab the bathroom counter to keep from falling down. Everything I thought I knew about my wife, about our marriage, about this mature separation we were having, crumbled in that instant. Natalie wasn't staying at Brielle's house, processing her feelings about our marriage. She was using our separation as an excuse to bring another man into our home, into our bed. I don't know how long I stood in that bathroom, staring at those boxer briefs. Time seemed to stop completely. My mind was racing through every conversation we'd had leading up to this separation, looking for clues I'd missed. Had she planned this? Was this the real reason she wanted me out of the house? The rational part of my brain kept trying to find alternative explanations. Maybe someone had broken in. Maybe it was some kind of misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew what I was looking at, and it made me sick. I forced myself to walk back into our bedroom and really look around. Now that I knew what to look for, the evidence was everywhere. There was a men's cologne smell on my pillow, a used condom wrapper under the bed, barely visible, but there. In the kitchen trash, I found an empty box of condoms, the expensive kind, the kind Natalie and I hadn't needed in years since she was on birth control. My wife wasn't just having an affair, she was having an affair in our home, in our bed, during what she had convinced me was a mature, therapeutic break from our marriage. I sat down heavily on our living room couch, the same couch where she'd given me that whole speech about preventive maintenance and individual growth. I felt like the biggest idiot who ever lived. While I was at Owen's place planning romantic gestures and thinking about how to be a better husband, she was playing house with someone else. But who? I thought through the men in her life. Co-workers, mostly. She'd mentioned several times over the past few months how much she enjoyed working with the new management team at her company. There was Adrian, the new creative director who joined around the time her behavior started changing. She'd mentioned him quite a few times, always in a professional context, but now those mentions took on a different meaning. Adrian has such innovative ideas about brand positioning. Adrian and I stayed late to work on the Johnson campaign. Adrian thinks I have real potential for executive leadership. The pieces were falling into place, and I felt like I was going to throw up. I knew I should confront her immediately, call her, demand an explanation, scream at her for betraying our marriage. But something held me back. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was the part of me that still hoped I was wrong, but I found myself thinking more strategically. If I confronted her now, she'd just deny everything. She'd say the underwear belonged to someone else, that she could explain the wine glasses, that I was being paranoid and jealous. She'd probably flip it around and make me the bad guy for violating her privacy by coming to the house during our agreed-upon separation. Instead, I did something I never thought I'd be capable of. I went to Best Buy and bought a small wireless security camera, the kind that connects to your phone and records to the cloud. I'd seen the commercials. They were marketed for home security, for keeping an eye on packages and break-ins. I never imagined I'd be using one to spy on my own wife. I installed it in our bedroom, hidden behind a picture frame on the dresser, where it had a clear view of the bed. The setup was surprisingly simple. Just download an app, connect to the Wi-Fi, and I could watch live footage from anywhere. Before I left the house, I made sure everything looked exactly as I'd found it. I even rumpled the sheets the same way and repositioned the wine glasses. If Natalie came home, she wouldn't know I'd been there. I drove back to Owen's in a daze. When he asked how the shirt retrieval had gone, I just mumbled something about traffic and went straight to the couch. I couldn't bring myself to tell him what I'd discovered. I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. That night I lay awake, staring at my phone, watching the empty bedroom through the camera app. Part of me hoped I'd been wrong, that I'd misinterpreted the evidence, that Natalie would come home alone and I could delete the footage and pretend this nightmare had never happened. But around 11 p.m., the bedroom light turned on. Natalie walked into frame, but she wasn't alone. Behind her was a tall man with dark hair, wearing the kind of expensive, casual clothes that screamed tech executive. Even through the grainy camera footage, I could see it was Adrian. The same Adrian whose innovative ideas my wife had been gushing about for months. I watched in horrified fascination as my wife of 8 years led another man to our marital bed. She was laughing at something he'd said, looking more relaxed and happy than I'd seen her in months. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something low-cut and clingy that she definitely hadn't owned when I left on Monday. They sat on the edge of the bed, and she poured wine from a fresh bottle into those same 2 glasses I'd seen earlier. They were talking, but the camera didn't pick up audio. Whatever Adrian was saying must have been charming, because Natalie kept touching his arm and leaning closer to him. I should have stopped watching. I should have turned off the phone and dealt with this like an adult. But I couldn't look away. It was like watching a car accident in slow motion. When they started kissing, I finally shut off the app. I didn't sleep at all that night. Thursday morning came, and I somehow managed to drag myself to work. I sat through meetings, reviewed structural plans, and made small talk with colleagues, all while feeling like I was underwater. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would race, thinking it might be footage from the camera. But thankfully, the house stayed empty during the day. Owen noticed something was wrong when I came back to his place that evening. I was probably acting like a zombie, barely responding to his questions, picking at the pizza he'd ordered for dinner. "Dude, you look like hell," he said, pausing the basketball game we were supposed to be watching. "What's going on? Is this separation thing getting to you more than you thought?" I almost told him everything right then. Owen and I had always been close, and he'd never particularly liked Natalie anyway. He'd probably have some choice words about what she was doing, but I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. Admitting it would make it real, and I wasn't ready for that level of reality yet. "Just processing some stuff," I said, which was the understatement of the century. Friday was worse. I kept checking the camera app obsessively, like picking at a scab. During lunch, I watched Natalie come home alone, and for a brief moment I felt a surge of hope. Maybe Wednesday night had been a one-time thing. Maybe she'd come to her senses. But then, around 6 p.m., Adrian showed up again. This time I forced myself to watch more of the footage. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. They weren't just having a physical affair, they were acting like a couple. He brought takeout from that expensive Thai place downtown. She changed into comfortable clothes like this was their normal routine. They ate dinner together in our dining room, using our wedding china. The intimacy of it was somehow worse than the physical betrayal. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a drunken mistake. This was domestic, comfortable, like they'd been doing this for a while. I started thinking back over the past few months, looking for signs I'd missed. All those late nights at the office, the new clothes. The way she'd been emotionally distant but physically unavailable too. Now I understood why. She'd been getting her needs met elsewhere. The most sickening part was realizing that our trial separation had probably been planned specifically for this. She hadn't wanted space to think about our marriage. She'd wanted space to play house with Adrian without the inconvenience of hiding it. Saturday morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of wallowing in misery and self-pity, I drove to a lawyer's office. I'd found Patricia Hendricks online, a family law attorney with excellent reviews who specialized in divorce cases involving infidelity. She agreed to see me on short notice, probably because I sounded desperate on the phone. Patricia was a sharp woman in her 50s who got straight to the point. I showed her the footage from the camera, explained about the separation that wasn't really a separation, and asked what my options were. "Well," she said, after reviewing the evidence, "the good news is that you have grounds for an at-fault divorce due to adultery. The bad news is that you're going to want to be very careful about how you handle this next part." "What are you thinking of doing?" I told her about my plan to confront Natalie when she returned on Sunday, and Patricia nodded approvingly. "Document everything," she advised. "Keep recording, and whatever you do, don't destroy any property or get violent. You want to be the reasonable party in all of this." After leaving her office, I went to Home Depot and bought new locks for every door in the house, high-security deadbolts that would require new keys. While I was there, I also changed our Wi-Fi password and transferred all our joint accounts to new ones in just my name. Saturday evening, I sat in my car outside our house and watched through the camera as Natalie and Adrian shared what looked like a romantic dinner by candlelight at our dining room table, with our wedding china and the candles I'd given her for our anniversary last year. The sight of it filled me with a cold, calculated anger that surprised me. For 4 days I'd been devastated, heartbroken, questioning myself. But now I just felt determined. She'd made her choice. She'd decided that our marriage was worth throwing away for whatever she had with Adrian. She'd used therapeutic language about growth and space to manipulate me into giving her a guilt-free week to betray our vows. Well, she was going to find out that actions have consequences. Sunday morning, I got up early and drove to the house. Adrian's car wasn't there. Apparently he didn't stay over on weekends, probably had his own life to get back to. The camera showed an empty bedroom with rumpled sheets and wine glasses on both nightstands. I spent 2 hours changing every lock in the house. Front door, back door, side entrance, even the deadbolt on the garden shed. When I was finished, Natalie's keys would be completely useless. Then I sat in the living room and waited. According to our agreement, she was supposed to come home at 3 p.m. so we could discuss what we'd learned about ourselves. I had indeed learned something about myself during this week apart. I'd learned that I deserved better than a wife who would use couples therapy language to manipulate me into giving her a free pass to cheat. At 2:55 p.m., I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the window, I could see Natalie getting out of her Honda, carrying a small overnight bag and a bouquet of flowers. She looked relaxed, happy even, like someone returning from a refreshing vacation. She was about to discover that her vacation was over. I heard her key turn in the lock, followed immediately by confusion as the door didn't open. She tried again, jiggling the handle. Then she knocked. "Marcus," she called out. "Marcus, are you home? The key isn't working." I walked to the door but didn't open it. "I'm here," I said through the wood, "but your key doesn't work anymore." There was a pause. "What do you mean it doesn't work?" "Marcus, open the door." "I changed the locks, Natalie. All of them." Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear her mind racing, trying to figure out what I knew and how much trouble she was in. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice taking on that carefully controlled tone she used when she was trying to manage a situation. "Why would you change the locks? Let me in so we can talk about this like adults." I almost laughed at that. Like adults. The same way we'd talked about our trial separation like adults. "We can talk," I said. "We can talk about Adrian." The silence on the other side of the door was deafening. I could hear her sharp intake of breath, the sound of her overnight bag hitting the porch floor. "I don't know what you think you know," she finally said, but her voice was shaking now. "But you're being ridiculous. Let me in, and we can discuss this rationally." "Rationally?" I couldn't help but laugh, and it came out bitter and harsh. "Like how rationally you discussed bringing your co-worker into our bedroom. How rationally you used our wedding china for your romantic dinners while I was across town planning to buy you jewelry." "Marcus, please." "I have it all on camera, Natalie. Everything. Adrian's car in our driveway, him bringing you flowers on Thursday, the two of you eating takeout in our dining room on Friday. Should I keep going?" The silence stretched on for so long that I wondered if she'd left. But then I heard a soft thud, like she'd leaned against the door. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "Then tell me what it is. Tell me how spending a week fucking another man in our bed while I'm planning romantic surprises for your return isn't exactly what it looks like." "We were separated," she said, her voice getting stronger, more defensive. "You agreed to the separation. I had a right to explore my options." "Options?" The word came out like a snarl. "Is that what you call it? Options? You manipulated me into leaving our home so you could play house with Adrian, and you call it exploring options?" "I needed to know if what I felt for you was real or just habit," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice now. "I needed to compare." "You needed to compare," I interrupted. "You needed to compare our 8-year marriage to a week-long fuckfest with your boss? And you thought the mature way to do this was to lie to me about staying at Brielle's while you turned our home into a love nest? I wasn't lying. I was trying to be fair to both of us." "Fair," I was shouting now, all my carefully controlled anger finally boiling over. "Fair would have been telling me you wanted a divorce. Fair would have been telling me you were having an affair. Fair would have been not using therapy speak to manipulate me into giving you a guilt-free week to cheat." "I wasn't cheating," she screamed back. "We were separated. I told you I needed space to figure out my feelings." "You told me you needed space to reflect on our marriage," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "You didn't tell me you needed space to audition my replacement. You didn't tell me you needed our house empty so you could see what domestic life would be like with Adrian." I heard her crying now, soft sobs through the door. "Marcus, please. I know this looks bad, but I do love you. This week helped me realize that what we have is worth fighting for, That's why I brought flowers. That's why I wanted to come home." "No," I said quietly. "You came home because your trial run with Adrian is over, and you wanted to see if you could slip back into our marriage without me ever knowing what you did. But I do know. I know everything." "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice broken. "What do you want me to say?" I thought about that for a long moment. What did I want? An apology? An explanation that would somehow make this all make sense? A guarantee that she'd never do this again? "I want you to understand that the woman who walked out of this house on Monday was my wife," I said finally. "The woman standing on this porch right now is a stranger who betrayed everything we built together, and I don't let strangers into my house." "So what happens now?" she whispered. "Now you figure out where you're going to stay tonight," I said. "Because it's not going to be here. And tomorrow you can call Patricia Hendricks. She's the divorce attorney I hired on Saturday. She'll be expecting your call." I heard her gasp, then more crying. "Marcus, don't do this. We can work through this. Couples therapy, counseling, whatever you want. Don't throw away 8 years because of one mistake." "One mistake?" I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. "Natalie, this wasn't one mistake. This was a calculated plan to have your cake and eat it too. You wanted to test drive a new relationship while keeping me as your backup option. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." "I choose you," she said desperately. "I choose our marriage. This week proved that." "No," I said, feeling strangely calm now that I'd made the decision. "This week proved that you're willing to manipulate and betray the person who loves you most in the world when it's convenient for you. I can't live with someone I can't trust. I won't." I walked away from the door then, back to the living room, where I could watch her through the window. She stood on the porch for another 10 minutes crying, and occasionally trying her key again, as if the locks might have magically changed back. Then she picked up her bag, got in her car, and drove away. I sat in our living room, my living room now, and thought about the man I'd been a week ago, that Marcus had been ready to buy his wife jewelry and plan romantic surprises because he thought their separation was about growth and communication. He'd been willing to work on himself to become a better husband, to do whatever it took to save his marriage. This Marcus knew better. This Marcus had learned that some betrayals can't be forgiven, some trust can't be rebuilt, and some people will use the language of love and growth to justify the worst kinds of selfishness. I pulled out my phone and looked at the camera app one more time. The bedroom was empty now, just rumpled sheets and wine glasses that would never be used for a romantic dinner again. Tomorrow I'd clean it all out, start over, figure out what my life looked like without someone who could look me in the eye and talk about preventive maintenance while planning to betray our vows. People will probably think I was too harsh. They'll say I should have tried counseling, should have been willing to forgive, should have recognized that she came back to me in the end. But here's what I learned during our trial separation. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Natalie showed me that she was someone who could manipulate me with therapeutic language, betray our marriage vows, desecrate our home, and then expect to slip back into her old life like nothing had happened when her experiment didn't pan out the way she'd hoped. I believed her. So tell me, Reddit, was I the asshole for changing the locks? Or was I just finally protecting myself from someone who had already shown me exactly how much our marriage meant to her? If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama. Got a take on the situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you.